Hey there, you glorious survivors of the 80s. Remember when seatbelts were considered optional, candy came in cigarette boxes, and the extent of parenting involved shouting, "Dinner's ready," from the porch? Yeah, good times. Nowadays, kids wear helmets to eat cereal. I'm not even kidding. We're diving into the hilarious, slightly terrifying, and totally true differences between growing up in the 80s versus the kids of 2025. Get ready for a wild ride down memory lane, where the biggest dangers were rusty swing sets and your older brother with a super soaker full of pee. Don't worry, we'll try not to trigger anyone's therapy sessions too badly. Let's go. All right, picture this. You're crammed in the back of a wood-paneled station wagon, windows sealed tighter than Fort Knox because, second-hand smoke-built character, and your parents didn't want you to catch a cold. Thanks, Mom. Dad's cruising down the highway, probably with a beer nestled between his legs, because hey, designated drivers were for communists. And you're engaged in a brutal game of, let's see who can punch each other hardest with your siblings. Simpler times. When a car ride was basically a demolition derby on wheels, and the only rule was, don't die. Fun fact. Until 1991, only 34% of US states even bothered with those fancy child car seat laws. We were basically indestructible. Fast forward to the dystopian hellscape that is 2025, where kids are strapped into car seats with more safety features than a freaking space shuttle. 7-point harness? Check. Organic, gluten-free snacks within arm's reach? Double check. God forbid you leave the baby wipe warmer at home, though. That's basically grounds for a visit from Child Protective Services, or worse. A strongly worded Facebook post from your mommy group. Gone are the days of impromptu wrestling matches and questionable beverage choices. Today's car rides are all about silent obedience, curated playlists, and the constant nagging fear that you've somehow violated a safety regulation you didn't even know existed. Remember candy cigarettes? Those chalky, sugary sticks that let you live out your wildest Marlboro Man fantasies before hitting puberty? Yeah, those were the days. Back then, sugar was king, and safety was a distant rumor. We had lollipops that could crack your teeth, gum that could pull out your fillings, and those little candy necklaces with the beads so hard they could knock you unconscious. And don't even get me started on the sugar content. We're talking enough sucrose to fuel a rocket ship to Mars. But hey, at least we weren't raised on kale chips and almond milk, right? Flash forward to 2025, where the only things scarier than Halloween costumes are the ingredient labels on your kids' organic, gluten-free, sugar-free, joy-free snacks. I'm not kidding, folks. In Sweden, they actually banned marshmallows. Marshmallows! They called it sugar terrorism. I mean, come on! Next thing you know, they'll be outlawing laughter because it might upset the broccoli. Listen, I'm all for healthy eating and all that jazz, but there's a special place in hell reserved for those who suck the fun out of childhood. Kids deserve candy. They deserve sugar highs and cavities. It's all part of the magical, messy experience of growing up. The 1980s. Kids roamed free like unsupervised raccoons hopped up on sugary cereal. Jungle gyms held together by rust and prayers, towering over unforgiving concrete. A broken arm was a rite of passage, not a lawsuit waiting to happen. Parents shoved us out with a Capri Sun and a rusty spoon. And you know what? We survived, mostly. Fast forward to 2025. Kids today are practically microchipped and bubble-wrapped. Playdates are scheduled weeks in advance on an app with background checks for everyone involved. And don't even get me started on the participation trophies. You get one for just showing up. Look, I'm not saying it was better back then. But hey, at least we learned some valuable life lessons. Remember lawn darts? Those aerodynamic spears of childhood joy? Nothing said fun like launching a pointed metal projectile. Good times. And by good times, I mean a visit from paramedics. And who could forget the joys of a 1980s chemistry set? Real chemicals, folks. Stuff that could melt your eyebrows off. These days, you're lucky if a toy can survive a 5-second drop test without being recalled for excessive fun. I swear, in 2023, a teddy bear was recalled because it was deemed too fluffy. Too fluffy. What is this madness? Toys today are so sanitized, so padded, so utterly devoid of any potential danger, it's a wonder kids don't die of boredom. Where's the thrill? The excitement? The constant fear of losing an eye? Look, I'm all for safety, but there's a fine line between protecting our children and turning them into risk-averse, bubble-wrapped hermits. Let them play with sticks. Let them eat dirt. Let them experience the joy of a good, old-fashioned skinned knee. Okay, buckle up, Buttercup, because we're about to dive into the glorious and slightly terrifying world of 1980s hitchhiking. Miss the school bus? No problem. Just stick your thumb out and wait for a kind stranger to offer you a ride. Back then, hitchhiking wasn't just a mode of transportation, it was practically a family tradition. Mom would pack you a juice box and a ding-dong, give you a kiss on the cheek, and send you on your merry way. And if a guy in a windowless van offered you candy, well, that was just a bonus. I'm kidding, of course, mostly. But seriously, in 1982, a whopping 60% of teenagers admitted to hitchhiking. Can you imagine that today? Your kid would be on the evening news faster than you could say Amber Alert. Fast forward to our modern hellscape of helicopter parenting and constant surveillance. Today, the mere mention of hitchhiking sends chills down the spines of parents everywhere. And for good reason, I guess. I mean, we finally figured out that not all strangers are friendly grandpas offering Werther's Originals. These days, picking up a hitchhiker is less helping a stranger and more potential felony charge. And you know what? I can't even blame society for this one. We've traded the carefree innocence of hitchhiking for the harsh reality of human trafficking, and that's a trade-off nobody wanted. But hey, at least we have Uber now, right? Sure, the drivers may rate you poorly for breathing too loud, but at least you'll probably arrive at your destination in one piece. Probably. The 1980s. Back when timeout meant being sent to your room, which was basically a lawless playground of Legos and unsupervised fun. These days, parents tremble at the thought of a timeout tantrum ending up on YouTube. Back then, tantrums were just Tuesday. You know that look in your grandpa's eye when he talks about walking uphill both ways in the snow? Yeah, that's the good old days of discipline. We're talking random smacks to the back of the head that were basically Dad's version of a fist bump. And don't even get me started on CPS. In the 80s, CPS stood for Can't Prove SHT because, let's be real, nobody was snitching. These days you sneeze too hard at your kid and you've got a social worker on speed dial. Back then, a stern look could curdle milk and nobody batted an eye. Listen, I'm not saying it was right, okay? I'm just saying it was a different time. A time when parents ruled with an iron fist, and maybe a wooden spoon if you were really pushing it. Fasten your seatbelts, kids, because we're about to take a trip back to a time when the only thing underage about your bar experience was the Shirley Temple in your hand. Yup, the 1980s were basically a free-range parenting experiment in what's the worst that could happen. And let me tell you, the answer usually involved a sticky floor and a whole lot of secondhand smoke. Picture this. You're 12 years old, perched on a bar stool like a pint-sized Don Draper, while your dad's busy racking up wins, or losses, let's be honest, at the pool table. The bartender? More like a surrogate uncle, slinging you Shirley Temples and asking if you want an extra cherry. Ah, memories. These days, you bring a toddler within a 50-foot radius of a brewery, and you're basically slapped with a noise complaint and a hefty fine. Try explaining to a millennial parent that bar snacks used to be the primary food group for children of the 80s. They'll probably call Child Protective Services. and then Instagram a photo of their gluten-free, organic, sugar-free, joy-free toddler snacks. Look, I get it. Times change. But sometimes I can't help but miss the days when a hostile environment meant your dad lost the pool game and was in a bad mood. Kids these days get a paper cut and it's an all-out code brown situation. Emergency room visits, anxiety meds for the parents, the whole shebang. Back in the glorious germ-infested 80s, we had one cure for everything. Walk it off. Broken arm? Walk it off. Concussion? Walk it off. Sudden onset of existential dread? Definitely walk it off, preferably while wearing a neon sweatband. We were like miniature Wolverines, except instead of regenerating limbs, we just built up a healthy tolerance for pain, and probably a few undiagnosed concussions. Fast forward to the year 2025, and a single peanut dust particle sends schools into full-blown lockdown mode. Kids are practically raised in sanitized bubbles, shielded from any potential threat to their delicate immune systems and their parents' sanity. Look, I'm all for progress, but have we gone too far? Back in my day, a sniffle was a badge of honor, a sign that you were out there, living your best life, germs be damned. I remember that my mom used to say, "Let the dog lick it, it will heal faster." Now, a cough is practically a declaration of war. What happened to us people? Okay, let's talk school supplies. Back in the glorious 80s, we weren't messing around with those cutesy cartoon-covered backpacks you see today. Nope, we had metal lunchboxes that could deflect bullets. Or at least a solid punch from your older brother. And speaking of lunchboxes, opening one was a health hazard in itself. I swear, half the time those thermoses were filled with lukewarm mystery soup and the other half with your mom's leftover meatloaf from 1979. But hey, at least we were building character, right? Or maybe just building up our immune systems to withstand anything. Seriously, kids these days wouldn't last 5 minutes in one of our school cafeterias. Back then, the food groups were mystery meat, tater tots, and whatever fell off the lunch lady's hairnet. Remember protractors? No, not the ones made of bendy plastic that couldn't measure a right angle to save their lives. I'm talking about the vintage, metal ones that could have doubled as ninja stars. And don't even get me started on the scissors. Those things were duller than a butter knife. Unless you were trying to cut paper, then they'd slice through your finger faster than you could say safety first. Oh, and who could forget about art class? We weren't just finger painting with non-toxic organic dyes. We were elbow-deep in clay that probably had more asbestos than a construction site. But hey, at least our lung capacity was off the charts from all that secondhand smoke in the carpool lane, right? Good times. All right, maybe I'm romanticizing a bit. Maybe those car rides weren't exactly safe. And okay, perhaps those playground injuries could have been avoided with a little adult supervision. But you know what? We survived. And maybe, just maybe, all that unmonitored time made us a little more resourceful, a little more independent, a little more us. We had to figure things out for ourselves, settle our own arguments, and entertain ourselves without the constant need for screens and structured activities. We were free-range kids, roaming the streets on our bikes, building forts in the woods, and generally just getting into the kind of mischief that builds character, or at least a healthy fear of authority figures. Look, I get it. Times change. Safety regulations exist for a reason, most of the time. And yeah, maybe we don't want kids today experiencing the same level of character-building danger we did. But there's something to be said for a little bit of grit, a little bit of resilience, a little bit of that "we walked uphill both ways" spirit. We may not have had all the fancy gadgets and overprotective parenting, but we had something just as valuable. Stories. Stories of adventure, of mishaps, of close calls, and of that unique brand of freedom that comes from being a kid in a world that hasn't quite figured out how to bubble wrap everything yet. So yeah, the 80s were a wild ride. We may have been raised by wolves, or at least parents who were too busy smoking indoors to notice, but we turned out all right, mostly. And hey, if you ever find yourself feeling nostalgic for those simpler, more dangerous times, just remember, you can always find a rusty metal lunchbox on eBay. Just promise you won't use it as a weapon.